You are listening to Redefining Rural, a podcast dedicated to celebrating, elevating, and changing the way we think about rural education in the state of Colorado and beyond. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platform.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Redefining Rural podcast. Michelle Murphy with the Rural Alliance. Super excited to be back with Kirk Banghart and our guest today, who will introduce themselves. Danielle LaPlatte is on the road yet again, so she will not be with us today, and we miss her, of course. So this season, as we said on our last recording, we're really trying to focus on innovative and exciting teacher recruitment and retention projects and programs in rural Colorado. And one of the biggest concerns around recruitment and retention is housing, and whether it's the availability of housing in certain communities and or the cost of housing in certain communities, or some combination of the two, it is a concern in the vast majority of rural school districts in the state. Something they all have in common, unfortunately. But fortunately, the Telluride Foundation, led by Paul Major, is doing some incredible work around providing housing for educators and I think other public employees, if I remember some of our conversations in the past. So we are here with Paul, and we're here with Todd Bittner, the superintendent in the Norwood School District, to tell us a little bit or a lot about their project. And Todd, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Norwood students, where you're located, and then we'll kick it over to Paul to talk about the project.
Cool. Well, again, my name's Todd Bittner. I'm the superintendent of schools in Norwood Public Schools. Norwood is a small rural, and Colorado is bespeckled with those all over the state. As I was mentioning to everyone, we're about 5.5 hours from a major airport, and the closest one is really Salt Lake City. We are on the southwest side of the state, and being in the southwest side of the state, if you look at a map, there's mountain ranges that surround us. Literally, we can see the LaSalle's and the backside of Moab from one place, and we can see the San Juans in another. It is one of the most beautiful areas, but it is isolated for all kinds of services. And when we have a teacher that wants to come here, they're coming here to take advantage of the beauty in the landscape. But there's also a acceptance that you're an hour and 20 minutes from a Walmart. You're an hour and 20 minutes from a large grocery store. We have 200 students in our school district. I would consider it my brother or sister school district is the West End School District. We have very similar demographics. We have anywhere from 30 to 45% free and reduced. And partly that's because we provide the workers for the Telluride ski area. And because of that, we have a lot of transient folks, and we have a lot of folks that come and go out of our schools. We struggle with stability. We struggle with being able to provide a well-rounded life experience for a single person. I mean, families can establish themselves because it's a gorgeous, beautiful way. We have, 1 out of 10, 1 to 10 ratio with our teachers to students, and it's an exciting place to be able to work. But where do you live? Houses here are extremely expensive because we're only 40 minutes from Telluride. It's a beautiful location, wonderful place, but really it's a place that's challenged to be able to find living and to find a place for single people to be here. And as every school district in the state is struggling with how to retain its students and how to retain its teachers and how to attract teachers, you have to become innovative in your solutions. And I was very lucky because Paul had already done all of this work. I walked into this job and 95% of this work was already done. And I put billboards up in the city to try to recruit teachers. But even if I have a teacher that wants to come here, I haven't had a place to put them. And here in Norwood and in the West End and in San Miguel County, we have the Telluride Foundation that really looks to find an innovative solution, a new solution in partnerships with communities, community members, and school districts to try to create a fantastic living arrangement for kids that are coming out of college that are looking for new opportunities. And that's what we're going to try to do here. Paul and I met for the first time just a few months ago, looking at the foundation of what's going to be a house for our teachers. And how exciting is that? That not only do you get to come and live in some of the most beautiful areas in the state, but you walk into a brand new house. And that's pretty cool stuff, because not every teacher gets that opportunity. And it certainly couldn't be done without community partnerships, the town, the county gave the land, and Paul can talk to all of those amazing relationships. But again, any of the solution that we're going to have in rural Colorado has to do with establishing relationships that are supportive of each other, and to make sure that they're going to work in the long term. These are not short-term fixes. These are long-term fixes. And that's what our goal is. Our goal is to make sure that this is the start of a continual process.
Well, and super exciting, Paul and Todd were sharing with Kirk and I that the first of the houses are actually on their way to Norwood as we speak. So that's super cool. Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about the housing initiative and your work in that regard?
Thank you, Michelle. So I'm Paul Major, and I was formerly the CEO of the Telluride Foundation for 20 plus years. We started thinking and working on affordable housing about 6 or 7 years ago within the Telluride Foundation, partly because we saw it as the single most important multiplier in rural communities. So when you talk about economic development or community development, or how are our schools doing, how are we doing on healthcare? How are we doing on health equity? It all comes back to housing. If you don't have access to high quality, affordable housing, you don't have much in a community. So we incubated this idea at the foundation. We then have spun it off, and now I'm running what we have spun off called Rural Homes. So I now work, it's a nonprofit developer. And essentially the approach on rural homes is to attack the cost of construction, because there's really only two ways to deal with affordable housing, or to build an affordable house. One is through tax credits, which are very competitive and are typically given for very large projects and rental projects, or two is attack the costs. So if you think about building a house, there's basically four costs. There's the cost of land, the cost of money to finance the building of the house, and then the cost of the house itself. So our approach, and this is what ties right back to school districts, was to go look for free land. And frankly, we are not doing this in Norwood with free land, but we looked at other school districts to say, you're long on land and short on teachers. How about if we build some homes for you, and make them available at below market costs for your teachers to attract and retain teachers? So it's as simple as that. The way to sort of illuminate or illustrate the gap between affordability and the crisis that we're all in is pretty easy through teachers, right? Or school district employees. The average teacher wage, I think, is $47,000 in the state. They can essentially afford a $250,000 home with that salary. There are no $250,000 homes being built in our rural communities. And what's priced at $250,000 is typically, on wheels. So, or old and dilapidated. So we're asking, to Todd's point, we're asking teachers to come and relocate to a great community, but where they're going to live is so below the standard of their career. I mean, it's just simple economics. So we've got to solve this. And it's easy to sort of illuminate as I said, the problem through teachers, but it's repeated with government employees. So most of these towns can't hire a town planner because there's no housing, even though they're paying good wages. They can't keep first responders. They can't hire nurses. So you just go down all these these are long-term, stable careers in great communities, but none of that works without housing. It just, it all comes back to housing. So That's essentially, what we're trying to do is create a model where we could build some housing in a place like Norwood, make it available, priced at the salaries of local teachers, and then rinse and repeat and see if we can do it over and over again. These are relatively small subdivisions, but Norwood's a small town. But this is in Norwood, we're building 24 homes. It's the first new subdivision they've seen in 30 years. And these houses are priced between a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house at $225,000 up to $400,000 for a 3-bedroom, 3-bath with a garage. The $225,000 house is about half of what it actually costs to build. So anybody that thinks you can build a house for $200 a square foot is not including all the costs. When you build roads and sewers and sidewalks and yards and fence the yards and landscape and deal with all the rules and regulations and everything else, the cost of construction has dramatically gone up. And this is not just COVID. This is just the escalation, because there's a lot more demand for that sector, the labor sector, the material sector, and construction, than there is supply. So prices are going to go up. And it has nothing to do with inflation. I mean, this is very similar to healthcare costs that have been just rising for a long period of time. Construction costs have been doing the same thing. So we're now in an era where the cost to actually build a modest, home for a generation just outpaces most of our salaries in a local community.
So Paul, talk to us a little bit how through the collaboration, how have you guys been able to drop that cost per square foot in the project and the work that you're doing?
So again, it's free land. So you take out the cost of land, that could be 10 to 15% of the cost of building a house. We get very low cost money. So we have gone out to some of the Colorado foundations and gotten very low cost loans to create a construction revolving loan fund. So we use that to build the house. And then when the house sells, we repay that loan. We've matched that with state money. So the state has been the most important partner in this, Department of Local Affairs and Department of Housing. So they provide us a pretty good grant. In the case of Norwood, it was about $25,000 per home was an outright grant. And then we've got $4 million in a loan fund from the state. And we combine that with $4 million that we raised from foundations. So, but that's not enough. We still need to go out and get some other grants. So in the case of Norwood, we'll have about $1.5 million in grants and on a $10 million construction project. So what we need to do, if you just do the math, $10 million to build it, $1.5 million in grants, we now need to sell those homes for $8.5 million. So we break even. So that it's simple math. It's great. It's, but you need to, the reality that the cost to build a quality home, again, a home, 2-bedroom, 2-bath with a storage unit and surface parking and landscaping, that is just far outpaced. The reality that has outpaced the salaries of not just teachers, but town planners and nurses and first responders and me and most of the people in the community that are making a good salary, have a great career, but there's nothing available as far as housing. That was depressing.
Well, let me see if I can underpress it just a little bit and understand that as Paul's talking about all of the infrastructural issues in running a small community, especially when it comes to the housing pieces, my parents are also part of this entire catchment of not being able to afford to live here. If they're living 35 miles outside of town, or if they can't have a place to live that's consistent, because frankly, rental prices are going to continue to increase because the amount of housing that's available in a area outside of this small rural area those prices keep going higher. So the prices in the community keep going higher. So like he's saying, I've got parents here that are first responders that work in Telluride or that work for the town, and they don't have a place to live. And if we don't provide some form of reasonable housing for them, and people in their heads may be going, isn't it more effective to be able to have apartments and have apartment buildings? What you want to do is establish a sense of ownership and a sense of community. How does a person start and establish a life if they don't do it with a sense of ownership? I mean, getting into a 2-bedroom apartment that's been rented 300 times is no way of creating a community. You create community by ownership, by having a sense of pride in what you have. And for us, our plan is with the house that we bought is to have that be a starter place. We love this community. Well, it'll be an opportunity for them to be in a brand new place, for our staff to be able to get a foothold in this community. And as Paul's project, as the Telluride Foundation projects grow and increase in our region, they're going to then be able to go and get their own home. I mean, we have to be creative in creating a root in our community, because the transient nature of teaching has gotten greater and greater. And we as communities need to come together with our local businesses, our local governments, and say, how do we get people to stay? Because they can visit for a year, but they can't live. So there's a value in having that ownership. And that's where those relationships came in.
So Todd, you had mentioned that the district bought a house. Is that
Correct.
You'll then lease that out to an employee?
We'll if a family of, we bought a 3-bedroom house, and if a family wants to come in that needs it, they'll have an opportunity of getting it. If I've got individuals that would just like to rent out part of one of the rooms and rent the house, they're welcome to do that. We're very open-minded on meeting the needs of what's coming into the community. I think that one of the things that we need is that flexibility, being able to provide something that is ours, that provides different opportunities for staff members to come in. And again, to get a sense for the community. And do we want to stay here or not? So it can also can be used as a tool for recruitment.
Yeah.
You have a family. I would love to hire a couple that's teachers. The couple that has somebody that's a middle school math and a high school science. Like how I threw that math and science in there, because that couple exists everywhere in the state. But I would really love to be able to use it in that term, Michelle. I'd really like to be able to use it as a promotion to be able to attract teachers to us.
And then the other, Paul, you mentioned, I think 24 homes. So the other homes are available for sale to a certain group of people, right? I'm assuming there's some restrictions in the deed, or how does that work?
Yeah, all of the houses are deed restricted. So they're deed restricted by income. So it's, I hate to talk in this jargon, but it's 120% area median income and below. So as a household, you've got to make less than 120 area median income for your county and below. And that depends on the household size. So if you're an individual, that may be $65,000 in that 120 AMI in San Miguel County. If you're a household of 4, it may be $110,000. So it's income restricted. You got to be at 120 and below. It's got to be owner occupied. So these are not rental properties. There are some opportunities, I think, for like a teacher may be off for the summer, and maybe there's some opportunity for rental, but you have to live in it. It is not designed for Airbnb or for you to live in Costa Rica and own this or whatever the scenario might be. And you have to be in the workforce. That's the third. So we essentially take the definition of a teacher. The number of hours that a teacher works is the definition of the workforce. So the deed restrictions are complicated because you're dealing with humans, and there's a lot of variations on all of this. But they've also been around for a long time, and they've been perfected in the courts, and we've learned a lot of the right way to do it. And they've had them in Aspen for 40 years and 30 years in Telluride. So we are very confident that our deed restriction really meets that goal of trying to have a teacher or an individual settle down in a community and they're not going to get rich on their house because there is an appreciation cap. Now they may buy the house and they could sell it the next year, but there's a 3% appreciation per year. So because if you don't have that appreciation cap, you could buy this house tomorrow and resell it for twice as much, because as I just said, we just built it for way below the replacement cost. So those are the 4 deed restrictions: that income, it's got to be owner occupied, you've got to be in the workforce, and there's a appreciation cap.
But it seems that that's a really positive thing for teachers to be able to build equity and ownership, in that they're not buying something that is going to cap them, that they're not going to get return, but you also keep it within that same structure, if I'm understanding correctly, that down the road, this will still be more affordable while that individual did get to build equity. They may not be able to build as much as, say, had they not been in this program, but it's not like a rental where they get nothing when they leave, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Kurt, that's exactly right. But also the era when we bought a house and it became our entire net worth, right? We got all the appreciation. It would go up 10% a year, and then we sold it. And all of a sudden, we bought that house 30 years ago for whatever, 50,000, and it sold for 300. That era is over, because now the house costs 300,000. It's already priced beyond the construction cost to build that house, is already priced beyond my salary and teacher salaries. Yeah. So the era of this appreciation, you can't have it both ways. You can't build all this equity, this unlimited equity in a house, and then keep it affordable. So it's a 3% appreciation cap. If they do remodeling, they'll get that adjustment in the price. All of those things will tilt towards them being a long-term homeowner, taking care of the home, reinvesting in the home. But it's not going to be that unlimited appreciation, which we have basically experienced, all of us. And the other fact is the housing markets go down. 2008 and 2009, prices went down. So you're not always going to have your house appreciate. But anyway, you can't have this appreciation or this wealth building tool in housing and keep it affordable and going forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting paradigm that probably for a lot of folks who, as you said, are in that older mindset, is to understand that this is a new reality for many of our younger employees, that having a place is critical, and not going into it understanding that it may not be your retirement account is a different paradigm for a lot of folks. So I thank you for bringing that forward, Paul, because I think that really helps for me frame it in a lot of times of how we need to help people look at the housing in a different light than maybe they're traditionally used to.
Well, and you're bringing, and like you said, Kurt, whatever they're bringing in to buy the home, they get to take with them when they leave the home. Yeah. And that's not something you have in a rental property. That's not something you have in an apartment. Whatever you're putting into it, you're getting back from it. And although there's a cap on the equity return, that doesn't mean that the work you're putting into it isn't coming back to you. And that's the piece that's huge. That's what allows that sense of ownership, that sense of pride.
And I think it's important to think more holistically too about this, wealth building, family wealth building or individual wealth building. So now you buy this house, it's price capped or appreciation capped, but now you have stability in that cost of what's allocated towards housing in your household. Now you can think about retirement funds. You can think about saving for college for your kids. You can think about healthcare. So when you stabilize housing, it has this multiplying effect where you can start to plan better for a whole bunch of other things that you've disregarded. And we've seen that. I mean, Habitat for Humanity famously says, household ownership is like a vaccine. It vaccinates you against all of these other dramas and traumas that could happen. You lose your job. but you've got housing and you can work around it. You still have to make your mortgage, but at least you've got, some stability. Health issues, saving for the future. So it does kind of change. It doesn't it changes that approach, which I think particularly could be, relevant for teachers that have good retirement plans. And so now they can think about other things and saving for college for their kids or investing in, in adding to their retirement plans.
So tell us a bit about I remember a conversation, Paul, with you and your team and a rural superintendent. One of the things I learned there was it needs to be a piece of land that has access to improvements, i.e. water, sewer. The pricing structure doesn't work if it's a more remote or isolated piece of property that doesn't connect quickly. Is that correct?
And that's why school district property is ideal. They're in the city.
Theoretically, it's right there. Yeah, when there's a town. Yeah.
They may not have the streets in there, but a 1 acre school district, a 1 acre parcel on a school district property is perfect. It can carry about 14 homes. It has water, fiber optics, power, all of that. Anytime you have to bring sewer, water, roads, all of that increases the price of the house.
That makes great sense. How is there still, do you have capacity to initiate these projects? I'm assuming there's a fair amount of front loading of the work. So should we be encouraging folks to get in touch with you if they're interested in pursuing this for their communities, or are you maxed out currently?
No, I think so. I think we want to build, Michelle, I think in that, is right up in your wheelhouse, build a coalition that, is there a track that we can really scale up for Colorado? Yeah. Is there an approach that we need to scale up for Colorado? So, and how do we do that? So we're just doing 3 pilots, probably 4, maybe 5 pilots, but, pilot projects. But I'm also talking to a health operator in Alamosa, healthcare operator in Alamosa, and we're again a nonprofit developer. We're trying to develop this model so it could be replicated. The state is very interested in replicating it. We're just not sure. First, we got to prove the model.
Right.
I got to get the houses that are being shipped now to Norwood on their foundation and Todd's teacher to move in there. So that's task number 1, which should happen over the next 45 days, 60 days. But you can't scale up a model until you prove that it works. And so that's where we are. And but yeah, no, nobody else has got a reasonable approach to figuring out how to build housing for school district employees. That's the bottom line. And the state's super interested in, how do we, and I know the governor is, and how do we develop a model that could be replicated? The state has a lot of financing, but at the end of the day, this is about execution. This is about some entity going forward in partnership with a school district or a community to get a piece of land, to get it, the entitlements approved, to sign the contracts, commit to that $10 million, and then go off and sell the houses. And none of that is for the weak need.
Right. Well said.
Well, it's definitely exciting to hear what you guys are doing. And Todd, congratulations that they're on the road as we speak. And so we'll be excited to hear how this next 45 days goes for you, and hopefully how those teachers can move into that new place and be an asset to your kids in your community. So we're really excited about this potential and hearing about this innovation that you all are doing. So definitely thank you guys for the work you're doing for the teachers and the communities. Paul, thank you for being a beacon in trying to tackle this new horizon. So thank you. Michelle, anything else?
No, just send us some pictures, Todd, of all the happenings on the ground, and we'll throw it up on our social media too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks both. We'll be excited to hear and report on how things are going.
Great. Thank you guys. And thanks.
Thank you guys.
Todd.